All right, everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the halfback. I got a little bit of a write-up here that I put together. We'll go through this first, and then I'll show you some examples. So to become familiar with the halfback analysis, and maybe to develop a trade strategy from that, we need to understand it and have examples of it. I teach this all the time. Um, and I get people asking, hey, okay, you taught me this, but how am I supposed to trade with it? I really try not to publicly show people how to trade like that. For one thing, I reserve that for my coaching clients, but for the other reason, if I tell you one way to trade something, you're only going to ever think of it that way. If I show you a behavior that price does, then you can build a trade strategy from that that suits you, because some people like to play a mean reversion and some people like to play the actual move. The other part of this is I can tell you something and you might kind of sort of believe me, but when you can prove it to yourself and you have 100% faith in what you just learned, you'll trade it completely different. It's easy to nod our head and listen to somebody tell us something and kind of sort of agree with them, but not really trust them because we haven't really examined it enough to grow that trust. So with this, to become familiar with the halfback when we're using it in analysis and maybe to develop a trade strategy from it, I need you to understand it. And then hopefully I need you to find examples of it. I'm going to show you some, but the more that you can find on your own, the more often that you can prove to yourself that this is a valid way to analyze and approach the market, the better you will perform when you try to use this, whether you're using it only for analysis or if you're setting it up for a trade. This will provide some insight into what the halfback can and cannot do, while also providing some possible considerations to that strategy development. This understanding has to come from the charts. Again, yeah, no one will ever be able to convince you of the halfback's power, and no one will ever teach it to you enough to make you trust it. The only way you're ever going to trust is to witness it and examine it until you fully understand it and you're ready to apply it. It's not just for this strategy either, or even for this concept of the halfback. Every single thing about trading, whether it's a moving average bounce, a MACD crossover, um, the power of a doji and a hammer and a shooting star, it doesn't matter what it is. We can talk about these things and you can read them and watch videos, but you're never going to really have that trust until you have that understanding. And the only way you're going to have that understanding is by going out and finding it and applying it into the past enough to where you can start to anticipate it in the future. There's multiple uses of the halfback. We can use it for analysis and support and resistance levels. We can use it for breakouts and breakdowns. We can use it for entries and exits. We can also use it for stop placements. The halfback can be extended beyond the next candle, which is really awesome, by the way. And you can leave it on the chart until it has been tested by price. I'll try to find you an example of that too. The halfback can also be applied across multiple time frames on both the analysis side and the trading side. So you might have a halfback on a 30-minute chart and be trading that halfback on a 2-minute chart. To begin the process of using the halfback, it's advised that you learn to recognize all of these various approaches. And to do that, we start on the higher time frame charts, weekly or daily, and we just begin moving the chart one candle at a time to evaluate if there was a halfback event. Once we find a halfback event, we can pause there and begin to analyze that event. Start with that time frame and consider what happened. Consider where it happened. Was price at the top or the bottom of a range? Was there a pattern like a belt hold or a star? I like to use evening stars and morning stars, but I just call them stars. Did price gap into that halfback at the open or fall into it at the open? Was it support or was it resistance? Once we're done looking at those two candles on the time frame that you found it on, consider marking it out and then dropping down into a smaller time frame chart for further evaluation. On the lower time frame chart, what happened when price reached that halfback level? What did the volume do when price got there? What can we learn from this and take away from this event? After looking at things on that lower time frame, we want to go back to the earlier time frame and continue to look for more halfback events. Okay, so nice little write-up. Let's kind of look at some of these charts. I'm on a daily chart. I got the SPY using this for the halfback analysis. Look at each day and look at how the previous day's halfback level offered support or resistance. I marked in red the days where we didn't have this event, and then I circled the first halfback that I found working from the right to the left. We can see this big old hammer here, and then we've got the event, a halfback event. So here, the red day, the doji with the long tail, was measured, and we marked the halfback level. The evening star reversal that came next bounced off of that halfback and then rallied up into the end of the day. Notice it's a green candle and it's filled. It's not a green candle that's hollow. When we get a green candle that's hollow, that means it opened and it ran and then it closed higher than it opened. What this is saying is that it opened up here and it fell and closed lower than where it opened, but it still closed higher than the previous close, which is why it's filled green instead of hollow green. So this was a halfback. We closed here and the market gapped up, tried to break out and fail, fell all the way down, bounced on that halfback level, rallied all the way back up and closed higher than the previous day's close. So that halfback worked. Here we've got another one. I went ahead and continued to mark out the ones we don't want to look at. We had this crazy big bullish bar. And in this example, I circled the second halfback we found because we had the first one already. And we can now look at a little bit more detail where I put on the measurement. Red hollow candle indicates that the candle closed higher than it opened, but lower than the previous close. So just like in the last example where we had a filled green candle instead of a hollow green candle, most of the time, red candles are not hollow. When they are, that means that price actually closed higher than where it opened, but lower than the previous close. And so that's why it's a hollow red one. So we can kind of game this out. We closed here, gapped down into the halfback, and then rallied back up to close off of that low. But we still held that halfback, right? So another halfback example. Now you're probably thinking, so what, man? I day trade. I don't do, the daily stuff, but all of these things had an intraday event, right? They're easy to find on the daily so that we can mark them and then go into the smaller time frames. But finding them on the daily is where the easiest work is done. Once we've got them marked, we can go into the smaller time frames and look at them in better detail and find the volumes there. So here I've got another halfback using the same candle, right? That big bar, but we're also using this turning candle here. I love that bar. I love that setup. So looking at it in better detail, we can see the halfback. That's actually where it gapped up and opened, and then it ran. So a break above a halfback. Absolutely awesome stuff, right? So these are just a couple of examples. And on the intraday, you can find the same thing, right? A lot of examples, but you have to do that sort of work. You want to go in, find the examples, study them in detail, really look at what price did when it got to that level. Try to evaluate and understand, why did it bounce off the level and reject? Why did it make it through the level and continue to go on? How would we want to use that in a trade? Were there any other things that we could have looked at to help give us some more clues as to what price was going to do when it did get to that level? Those are the kind of things that will help you better understand how you want to trade with it, if you are even going to trade with it. Maybe you just want to use it for analysis. So there you go, the halfback in better detail. The first video, I think, right? I think maybe a couple more of these videos on a smaller time frame would be really useful, but want to keep them short, keep them to the point. And today I think we covered a lot. You want to just work through these steps a little bit at a time. Continue to prove to yourself that that halfback level has value. And you're not just looking for it to be a support or resistance, right? Whether price, manages to break through all the time or fails to break through all the time, but better, you want to understand what price is doing when it does get to that level. If it looks like it's going to break through, how can we tell and what can we do with it? If it looks like it's not going to break through, what does that mean for us? And is there a trade because of that? Looking at it from more than just a line in the sand where, it's a binary event of win or lose and higher or lower. But what does it mean for us on the trading day? And what are we going to do if it does reject or if it does hold and we break through? Everybody, I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing you at the next video.